we are pleased to hear that you will be attending the COP in Egypt personally. It's an important occasion, particularly because it's an African COP, but it's an important occasion because we have, as a country, important messages that need to be given at the COP, particularly to the developed countries. We have all been watching with consternation the impact that the war in Ukraine has had on the consumption of fossil fuels, and the concern we have also that developed countries have been rather stingy when it comes to funding climate change matters in poorer countries. But when they go to war with each other, they seem to very easily find huge volumes of cash to spend on the war. And so this is something, frankly, that I think they need to be reminded about, that it's a very strange thing. And then we have developed countries preaching to us. We don't mind being preached to, because we should be preached to. We know we're a high emitting economy. We know that we've got a dependence on coal that shouldn't go on forever. But the people who are preaching to us are busy increasing their own consumption of fossil fuels because they are busy at a war. Europe is a net importer of coal. So when they say that we should shut down our coal mines, which we know we should, the finger points to them too. And the United States is continuing to grow as a net exporter of fossil gas, which mainly comes from fracking. So it's a time of enormous concern to us, and we do hope that the developed countries are going to find a way of giving a proper message at this COP. Chairperson, I'm quite certain that the social partners represented on this commission would share those brief views that I've expressed. But before I call on you, I'd like to just call on the Executive Director to introduce us to the meeting and what's going to happen in this meeting. Dr. Olver.
Thank you, Deputy Chair, and very good afternoon, President, who is the chair of this commission, and to all the commissioners and to everyone that's listening in. So, as the Deputy Chair said, this is a special sitting at which the President and his team is going to brief us on the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan. It's obviously happening at a very important time for the world and for us as a country. So we're about to go to COP27. We're incredibly proud that the President is leading our delegation to COP. The JETP, as it was called then, was announced at COP26. There's been a team led by Mr. Daniel Manele hard at work putting together the details of the $8.5 billion deal. And as you would have heard from the press a few weeks ago, Cabinet finally signed off on a draft that would be put out to stakeholders for consultation. So we're looking forward, Mr. President, to your introductory remarks, and then Mr. Manele will do a presentation. So thank you, and over to you.
Mr. President.
Well, thank you, Deputy Chair Wale Musa, and thank you to CEO Chippy Olver. And indeed, thank you and greetings to all of you fellow commissioners. And thank you for agreeing to have this rather special, and as you called it, ad hoc session. We thought it was important for us to have this session so that we have an opportunity to have a discussion with yourselves following discussion that we had in cabinet regarding the investment plan and some of the issues that and the activities we've been involved with or in following the discussion at cabinet. So this for us is very important. It is also important ahead of our trip to Egypt at COP27, which Mr. Musa, as you correctly say, I will also be attending to represent our country and our people, together with a number of ministers and officials. It's a very important gathering of the world, really. You might recall that exactly a year ago to this day, I addressed a special session at COP26. I did so on the virtual platform, COP26 in Glasgow, on the topic of accelerating a just and inclusive energy transition. Much as I wasn't there and present with other leaders, I said then that while the energy transition is necessary for reducing global carbon emissions, the transition that we have to embark on must be a fair and a just one. That commitment to a just transition has remained at the very center of our agenda as government, and indeed in the work of this commission. And I must once again commend you, Deputy Chair, and the commission for the excellent work that has been done thus far in executing the mandate that I passed on to the commission when I appointed you. As we gather here today, our country is confronted with three interrelated crises. We face a shortfall in electricity supply, which has caused our economy immense damage and continues to destroy jobs and livelihoods. It's put a number of businesses in great difficulty. Some have had to shut down. So this is a real crisis, and its enormity is widespread throughout the country. The other overbearing crisis is that we face unacceptable levels of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, which strain the very fabric of our society in ways that are just so heavy on the people of our country. And thirdly, we face the critical and urgent threat of climate change, the effects of which we are already experiencing in South Africa, in that we continue to face all the calamities that are given rise by climate change. On the east of our country, we have continuous flooding that destroys public infrastructure, that destroys homes of our people, businesses, and just devastates the life of our people. And on the western side, we face the specter almost on an annual basis of continued droughts. We must confront and overcome these challenges, not only for our own sake, but for the sake of future generations. And what we do now to address these challenges is going to have an impact on future generations. Today, on the threshold and the eve of COP27, we have decided that we should release South Africa's Just Energy Transition Investment Plan for discussion, as I said in the National Assembly yesterday, for discussion amongst our people, and also principally also for discussion by the Commission. This is a plan that we're putting out for that purpose, and thereafter we expect suggestions, views to be put forward, and indeed we expect that the discussion will be widespread as to involve as many of our people as possible. This plan outlines the scale of need and the investments that will be required to achieve our decarbonization commitments, and to do so while promoting sustainable development and ensuring a just transition for our country, and in particular for our people, as in workers, as in communities, and vulnerable people who are going to be directly impacted as we execute this plan. But it must also be a just transition that also has an impact on the social life of our people, on the economic life of our country, on businesses, and various categories of the people of our country. The investment plan, which we will be releasing for discussions, provides us with what I would call a blueprint to address these three challenges, recognizing that they are indeed inseparable and must be seen and addressed in totality. It is about addressing the global risks of climate change, which we experience annually, while also ensuring that as we navigate our way through this transition, we create jobs, new jobs, in new sectors that are going to have to accompany our transition as we move forward. But also, this must be based on our key objective of ensuring that there is inclusive economic growth in our country. The investment plan was in the end developed in a process that demonstrated country ownership and leadership and ensured careful regard to South Africa's ambitions and priorities. Now, it includes a portfolio of investments across a number of priority sectors, principally the electricity sector, the green hydrogen sector, and the new energy vehicles, as well as initiatives to ensure a just transition. This plan is firmly rooted in the just transition framework, which was developed through widespread consultation, which was conducted by this commission. It was also conducted or consulted with our communities and organizations across the country, and was adopted by Cabinet in August of this year. So it is very much a part and parcel of this process of consultation and discussions. And it is for this reason that it has to be released for discussion, for consultation, for views, and everything else that goes with consensus building. Now, this framework stresses that workers and communities must share in the benefits of the climate transition and the creation of new industries, new sectors, and jobs if we are to fulfill our commitment to leaving no one behind. When I was answering questions yesterday in National Assembly, I did say, we have embraced and adopted this leaving no one behind concept, not only as political speak, but as an important concept which is quite important for our country to move forward with regard to the just transition. The plan indicates that South Africa will require approximately 1.5 trillion rand over just the next 5 years to enable a just transition and achieve the ambitious targets we have set out in our nationally determined contribution. Now, other people who continue to look at our economy, and when they look at our economy, they take a long-term look and they go to 2050. They say that we are going to need much more money, and they are right, they are correct. This is just in the 5 years that a 1.5 trillion rand will be necessary. And going forward, much more money will be needed. Now, this includes investing in our transmission and distribution networks in areas such as the Northern Cape, expanding renewable energy sources to achieve energy security, building local production capacity and infrastructure in new sectors such as green hydrogen, electric vehicles, and investing in local economies to develop skills and enable economic diversification. Now, in essence, this investment plan is the first of its kind globally, in both scale and ambition. It provides a vision of a future South Africa, which is a leading player in a new low-carbon global economy. In developing our plan, we consulted, as I said, many stakeholders and involved relevant technical experts on the needs of key societal groups such as youth, business, civil society, labor, faith-based organizations, local government, and indeed a number of institutions. These engagements will continue during the implementation phase of the investment plan, and they will be based on what will also come out of the consultation process. Now, the quality of this plan is testament to the deep knowledge, expertise, and capability that exists in our country, in civil society, in academia, and elsewhere. And the good thing is that we've involved some of the best brains in our country who have made a real meaningful contribution. I wish to thank the Inter-Ministerial Committee under the leadership of Ministers Krisi, Gungubele, Mantashe, Godongwana, Patel, Godan, and Pando. They have provided political leadership to this Presidential Climate Finance Task Team, led by former Deputy Governor of our Central Bank, Mr. Daniel Minele, the Secretariat for the Just Energy Transition Partnership, led by Ms. Joanne Yawich, and the many individuals and organizations that have contributed over the past year to this effort. Achieving the pathway set out in the investment plan will require substantial financial support from developed economies as part of their global partnership financing obligations. The plan makes it clear, and I'd like to say, even as you read the executive summary, it makes it clear that the scale of funding that is required to achieve our country's ambition is significantly higher, much higher than the funding that has been offered through the Just Energy Transition Partnership that we launched together with our international partners at COP26. Now we're working with our international partners to identify additional funding and financing sources to meet outstanding needs. While the initial funding committed by partner countries will play an important catalytic role, it is not sufficient to meet the scale of our ambition. And in going to COP27, that's precisely the message that we will be taking forward. Supporting a just transition requires adequate financial support that must include a significantly larger grant funding component to ensure the implementation of active labor market policies, reskilling, upskilling, as well as the creation of new industries on a considerable scale. I am currently communicating with the leaders of the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, and France to indicate this need to them. And I have already spoken to some of them to say, we need much greater funding than what has been put on the table to support our plan. And I have stressed that the component of the grant funding is far lower, much lower than what we need to fund our transition. We are a country that is already heavily burdened with debt. And I've communicated very, very clearly to them and will be having further discussions with them. And they've been rather open and willing to listen to us on this quest for more funding, because our plan can really only be fully and properly executed if there is more grant funding and if there is more funding made available in the form of concessional loans, as well as investment packages that can be put forward. Now, I should say, in fairness to some of these partners, they have come forward to say, yes, they are willing and prepared to make more proposals, to put more proposals on the table. Our path towards a just energy transition cannot be separated from the need to deliver real progress and practical climate actions on the priority issues for Africa and other developing economies. Deputy Chair, you are absolutely right with your opening remarks in saying that we have seen the more developed economies, particularly in this period of this conflict between Russia and the Ukraine, moving more and more towards utilizing fossil fuels, which it is said the whole world should move away from. And we've seen them even going back to utilization and some of them reopening of some of their coal-fired power stations. But we also remember that the promise that was put out in Paris, that they would make available up to $100 billion a year so that all of us can transit in a much more effective way in terms of the support that we need, the mitigation that should be there, and how we should adapt. That promise was never really fulfilled. Now, even as we move forward, as we should, given the exposure we have to climate change, we remember what has happened in the recent past. And it is for this reason that we are emboldened to argue and agitate for more funding, even within the parameters of the deal that was struck in COP26 for the $8.5 billion, and which we say, much as it is welcome, it is not enough, and the grant funding thereof also needs to be upgraded. So we need to see significant progress on adaptation, support, mitigation in the whole process as we deal with the impact of climate change on our own country. We have an obligation to hold developed economies accountable by making sure that they do honor the financial commitments that they undertook in Paris, as I said. So that for us is critical. And that is the message that we will be taking to COP27. The key challenge for South Africa and our sister countries on the continent is access to new, at-scale and predictable funding that does not further exacerbate our debt crises. Many of our countries, our own included, carry inordinately high levels of debt. We are pleased with the level of interest already shown by other countries in supporting South Africa's energy transition journey. We are at an advanced stage of engagement with other governments beyond International Partners Group and are looking to progress discussions with other interested parties. And let me say, these discussions will be held with a view of advancing our own national interests and the interests of our people. We are also encouraged by the level of interest from philanthropic organizations and are looking forward to working with them. And a number of them have come forward and in a way encouraged by the very, very bold and positive step that we have taken in putting forward our own position, our own national contribution, determined contribution. Now, by releasing this plan, we are placing the ball firmly in the court of the international community, particularly your developed economy countries that have, through their own industrialization, through their own advancement of their economies, contributed greatly to the damage of our climate, who through the emissions that they have contributed to into the atmosphere, to a large extent have brought us where we are. In the end, no one can doubt our boldness, our level of ambition, and our commitment to doing our part to address the global challenge of climate change. Following the launch of this investment plan for discussions, an implementation plan will be developed to maintain momentum and ensure we deliver on our commitment. Now, that implementation plan will follow in the wake of various views that will be put forward. As was the case with the investment plan, the implementation plan will be led by the South African government and our social partners. It will be developed in accordance with our self-determined climate policy goals as outlined in our NDC, so as to ensure a structured, phased, and well-sequenced transition process. What remains is to ensure that we have the support, the funding, and the capability to translate our vision into reality. This task will require strong collaboration amongst all of us as South Africans. It will also require ongoing engagement to continually strengthen and adapt the plan as a living document as further inputs are made that will serve the interests of the people of our country. It will need each of us to play our part. And this commission is an important structure that will also be playing a key role. Now, let us take the next step on this long journey with determination, with hope, and with solidarity. I have no doubt whatsoever that the work that the Commission is doing will contribute greatly to embolden our position, but also to embolden our standing in the world, on our continent, as we continue to traverse this path of addressing the challenge of climate change. And I do believe, Deputy Chair, that working together and doing all what needs to be done together will be able to succeed. Now, Mr. Daniel Minele will be able to outline the broad parameters of this plan, which, as I said, we will be putting out so that we can have the discussions and the consultation that is needed. Thank you very much. And I look forward to the discussions and to the inputs so that we can also be much clearer as we go to Egypt on what message we need to be transmitting to the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those words, President. I don't know how much time you have, but I thought before you leave us, perhaps there may be, I know that it's a busy time for you, so we won't detain you unnecessarily, but the commissioners may have one or two brief comments for the President before we go on to the presentation. Is there anybody that wants to say anything? You know, it's not every day that you can say something to the President. So if you do want to say something, if not, then President, let me just say that we look forward to interrogating the investment plan as has been developed by the government. And this is what the Commission is there for, in order to look at it. And we've got all of the social partners of the Republic represented on the Commission, the various sectors of the economy, and the 4 trade union federations, a number of the environmental NGOs and various other sorts of people. So be assured that we will leave no stone unturned to consider the plan, to consult if we need to even more broadly, and government will get the feedback from the Commission. I'm not able to say what it will be, but I'm quite certain that we will not in any way delay things. Thank you for the comments you've made about your international perspective and your perspective on COP27. I think that gives us also a great deal of courage. With that being said, let's go on to Mr. Minella. If you are with us, perhaps you could go on and do your presentation.
Thank you, Deputy Chair of the Presidential Climate Commission. Your Excellency, President Ramaphosa, Honorable Ministers present and other commissioners, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to present to you South Africa's Just Energy Transition Plan for the years 2023 to 2027. While the screen is being brought up and shared in terms of the presentation, allow me to start by conveying my thanks and appreciation to my colleagues in the Presidential Climate Finance team, the JETP Secretariat, staff in the Presidency, and for their tremendous support and dedication, without which today's significant milestone of being able to present the investment plan could have not been achieved. And I would also like to echo the President's remarks in thanking the Inter-Ministerial Committee on the Just Energy Transition Partnership, the PCC, and last but not least, also our colleagues in the International Partner Group. The South Africa's Just Energy Transition Investment Plan that's been released today marks the culmination of months, as was indicated, of dedicated technical work drawing on an immense knowledge base and generosity, really, of South African institutions, of organizations and experts in energy and just transition who have made available their time to assist and support and give us wise counsel in the process of developing the plan with the support of the Secretariat. I hope that today's presentation, which is a brief summary of a comprehensive and detailed plan running into some 200 pages, will provide the relevant context for when you then engage with a full document. It is a 5-year Just Energy Transition Plan, and as I indicated, covering the period 2023 to 2027, and supports South Africa's systemic approach to establishing a low-carbon economy and a climate resilient society. As was indicated, it sets out the scale of need and the investment that is required to achieve our decarbonization commitment in a just manner. And the key features includes that it recognizes the special needs of fossil fuel dependent countries such as ours, South Africa, as they shift energy systems towards low emissions development. It contributes to building resilience to transition risks and social preparedness as South Africa transitions its energy systems and grows new green industries. The plan is driven by South Africa's specific needs during the 5-year period, into which our international partners make their important and catalytic contribution. So the investment plan is not written for the $8.5 billion arising from the JETP only, but takes a broader view of the first 5 years based on South Africa's needs, South Africa's priorities, South Africa's ambitions. It emphasizes the sequence of investments and interventions that are needed to achieve the desired outcomes, and ensuring that the just component is operationalized such that it considers local and sector-specific vulnerabilities. So the primary objectives of the approximately 1.5 trillion JETIP can be summarized as follows: is meeting South Africa's ambitious NDC targets for decarbonization to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to within the range of 420 to 350 million tons of CO2 equivalent. And secondly, is to enable a just transition for those affected due to their dependence on the fossil fuel value chains. And of course, lastly, advancing development of new green industries to enable domestic growth and job creation. So it presents a portfolio of investments and related interventions in 3 priority sectors: electricity, new energy vehicles, and green hydrogen, underpinned by a central theme to enable the just transition, which I will touch on a little bit more in the next slide that we can go to, please. So in terms of how the central feature of just transition is framed, the JETIP aligns to the definition of just transition as contained in the cabinet-approved just transition framework. And I quote from the slide there: "A just energy transition South Africa builds resilient economies and people to meet NDC targets. It does so through accelerating affordable, decentralized, diversely owned renewable energy systems, restoring previous and future ecosystems and natural resources impacted by coal mining and energy production, reskilling present workforces and educating future ones in green and other new and viable development pathways, and building new productive models for comprehensive economic transition, and supporting various impacted constituencies to ensure that they play an active role in decision-making in implementation of energy transition programs, be it at the central government level or with non-government actors or at subnational government." And the 3 areas really of action as far as the just transition concerned, again, can be succinctly summarized as interventions within the coal-producing and coal-reliant areas focused on workers, communities and municipalities. And secondly, interventions within communities negatively affected then by the shift away from internal combustion engine vehicles. And thirdly, interventions across a multitude of sectors in multiple localities throughout our country to advance regional economic diversification. The total investment plan needs, as indicated, run into approximately 1.5 trillion rands for the next 3 years. And in relation to the 3 sectors just mentioned, and where investment requires, as you can see in the slide there, the bulk of the investment, around 70% or so, is required in the electricity sector, with about 22% going into green hydrogen, and the balance then for new energy vehicles. And I'll touch a little bit more and give more details later in the presentation. But, briefly, the electricity sector is the single biggest contributor to South Africa's carbon emissions, followed by the NEV and transport sector. But this sector is also a significant employer and earner of export revenues. While the green hydrogen sector is still nascent, it harbors great potential to enable green industrialization and addresses decarbonization in hard-to-abate sectors. And this is in addition of also, in regard to this sector, of export potential to drive long-term economic growth. We move to the next slide. That talks to the portfolio prioritization criteria. So the first step in South Africa's JETIP, as was being developed, was to articulate the country's needs and priorities that would contribute towards building resilience and to transition risks, and that would enable a just transition to foster economic growth and development. So the portfolio presupposes a particular sequence and order of investments that would be essential to achieve the required environmental in relation to lower greenhouse gas emissions, social with regard to protections and options for affected communities, and of course economic in terms of restoration and diversification. Those are the outcomes, and South Africa would require the investments to be expedited, particularly in 2023 to 2024, to start building the foundations that will then allow for the desired outcomes further down the line in the medium to long term to be realized. And the prioritization criteria for the investment portfolio will really result in and lead to a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and they'll deliver just transition outcomes, be catalytic in nature, and obviously be ready to be implemented. The next slide illustrates that we've already been on a transition journey, and that the JETP, the JET investment plan builds on strong policy and regulatory frameworks and foundations that already exist. So the JETP builds on from the National Development Plan, from the nationally determined contributions, the Just Transition frameworks, and the various enabling policies that are under development and in implementation as we speak. As we can see from the slide there, the renewable energy and independent power producer procurement program goes back to 2011. The low emission development strategy of 2020, the green papers on NEVs and the Just Transition framework from the DMRE, the revised NDC itself, and of course this year as the PCC, your own national transition framework shows that this is an integrated and holistic approach in terms of how the strong policy and regulatory framework has been evolving, and with work, of course, that's ongoing, that has to do with issues such as the Renewable Energy Master Plan and the Green Hydrogen Commercialization strategy that's currently being worked on. The next few slides go into a little bit more detail in terms of the three priority sectors, starting with the electricity sector. The electricity sector contributes to approximately 45% of South Africa's overall greenhouse gas emissions, and therefore was correctly identified and afforded priority because it provides the largest mitigation potential. So decarbonizing the electricity sector and diversifying the energy mix is integral to improving the security of energy supply in South Africa and to enabling sustainable economic growth. As indicated earlier, the JETIP estimates that around just over a trillion rand of investment is needed in this sector, which will be addressing electricity infrastructure. There'll be support to Mpumalanga, municipal readiness for energy transition, and new models for sector-wide ownership and localization of clean energy value chain. What is important to highlight is that the just component is very central to the transition of the electricity sector, and that just investments are actually embedded alongside the technical ones to ensure that workers and communities are not left behind. The investment plan includes interventions within coal-producing and coal-reliant areas to spearhead diversification and socio-economic transformation for those who will be most impacted by the phase down of coal in line with the energy policy. But this latter dimension is particularly important given the high concentration of distributional impacts that will affect and that will be felt in Mpumalanga over the short to the medium term. So between next year and 2024, South Africa needs to prioritize strengthening the grid, accelerating renewable energy investments, and preparing communities and local government for the phasing down effects of decarbonization in the form of mine and plant closures and repurposing. If we then move on to the new vehicles, the new energy vehicles, as many of you will know, South Africa is a well-established vehicle manufacturing sector which needs to pivot to new energy vehicles. If the sector is not transformed, there are significant economic consequences from the threat of obsolescence, as the sector is a significant contributor to South Africa's GDP, at around 5.5% of GDP. It's responsible for approximately 15% of our export revenues and also a major employer. So the NEV element of the investment will be focused on supply chain localization, setting the base for manufacturing of new energy vehicles and new energy value chain components to provide both sector stability and new growth through green product manufacturing. And in the NEV sector, when it comes to the just investments, these are focused on communities that will be negatively affected by the switch away from internal combustion engine vehicle manufacture and the maintenance work related to that. This slide shows the distribution of the allocation of the amounts. Going to the next one, the green hydrogen sector, to which approximately 320 billion has been allocated. This, of course, presents new opportunities for South Africa. It can enable the transition of key carbon-based and international trade exposed sectors, protect competitiveness of some downstream industries, and allow and enhance exports. It can boost GDP and, of course, support decarbonization domestically and create jobs. So the JETP here is focused on establishing South Africa as a leading exporter and domestic consumer by incubating the local green hydrogen ecosystems, by undertaking critical planning, feasibility studies, proofs of concepts, and building the necessary skills that will be required. And across all sectors, there are, as we indicated earlier, there are interventions to support deep decarbonization and promote economic diversification and inclusive industrial development at a national and subnational level, and to make sure that we build resilience for our economy and embrace new opportunities. If I can move on then to matters of finance. So a process that was country-led and country-owned, as the President alluded to earlier, as part of this just energy transition, also then meant that we needed to take a lead on the form and the quality of the finance that will meet South Africa's unique circumstances and needs. So the just energy investment plans financing is premised on a set of guiding principles that we defined up front to guide the quality of the finance that South Africa needs to secure for the investment plan. They also reflect how the $8.5 billion offer from our partner countries then were assessed when this presented. So why do they matter? These principles are important because they acknowledge the fiscal realities and the development priorities of South Africa. They ensure that the resources that we secure do not unduly encumber present and future generations, and set expectations for how South Africa intends to structure, intends to manage, and enable its just energy transition. Some of these principles include that the funding instruments and the financing package that would arrive at should reflect South Africa's priorities, taking into account the need for fiscal sustainability, in particular, that any debt-related terms for the sovereign should be on attractive terms, on more attractive terms, in fact, than South Africa's national treasury could secure in the capital markets, and without placing on us unduly onerous reporting requirements. Another principle is that the financing flows should be predictable and certain as they come from our partner countries to help sustain implementation of the JETIP, and an appropriate disbursement channels should be utilized, taking into account also some of the domestic capacities and capabilities that exist in the form of involving our own development finance institutions. And finally, a very important principle is one that indicates that risk sharing is an essential element, whereby partnerships with the private sector and other funding partners need to recognize the shared responsibility to respond to just energy transitions. Coming to the financing, the JETP presently has a funding gap of around 700 billion rands, and that assumes that the funding from the private sector and some of the DFI funders that we've engaged and who have expressed interest in supporting the investment manifests in the manner that those discussions suggested. The JETP offer of 8.5 billion, clearly, as has been said, is an important contribution to support South Africa's ambitions, which have resulted in this funding need of about 1.5 trillion. But as the President said earlier, beyond the JETP and its initial 5 countries, as partners, there are several other sources of funding and other parties that have indicated interest in supporting the JETP, and the discussions in this regard are actually currently being advanced with those relevant parties. But risk sharing as a basis for resource mobilization in particular requires that the financial industry, domestically and internationally, optimize its technical and financial skills based to structure innovative financial solutions, which is the next focus of the work that we need to be undertaken. But these will likely include a more programmatic approach rather than the traditional models of project by project, or at least a combination of those, and finance and cost-effective tool sets for monitoring and reporting green investments. So there's a lot of innovation, a lot of agility and flexibility, and thinking somewhat outside of the box will be required in getting to the granularity of the financing structures. The next slide gives an indication of the actual offer from the IPG, both on the basis of the countries and the contributions that will be coming from those countries, but also gives a sense of the actual instruments that would be used, be grants, be concessional loans, commercial loans, guarantees, and sets out how the 8.5 billion is made up. The President has spoken to issues that will need to be progressed and discussed further in getting to finalizing the financing packages. But the point that was made earlier, of course, that the 8.5 billion offer is a really relatively small amount, which contributes to between 10 and 12% of the actual needs for the initial 5-year period, but nonetheless, a very important component and a catalytic sort of first step in getting us there. I will draw to a close soon. The next slides just indicates how this initial 8.5 billion from the IPG as a first important contribution, as I said, would be allocated across the priority sectors. These are indicative allocations with further discussions needing to be had. And the key, of course, being, as we've indicated, that this needs to align with South Africa's ambitions and priorities. And the offers that we've seen in terms of them being assessed against the financing principles that I've just talked to, we find that some align, that they align to varying degrees in terms of what we are seeing, but that primarily they geared towards decommissioning of coal power plants, expanding and strengthening the transmission grid and distribution infrastructure, and supporting economic diversification in the affected coal mining areas, and of course in deployment of renewable energy. The key issue that follows now, after the plan has been released, will of course be implementation. And I was saying to the colleagues in the Secretariat and the task team that with all the effort and the hard work and the heavy lifting that has been done, all we've got to actually essentially is just getting the ticket to the game that we now need to play to win, and which speaks to a relentless focus on effective implementation. So the issues that will form part of the work that now follows have to do with making sure that in the priority sectors with the implementation entities that would be involved, that we assess their capabilities and institutional needs in terms of enabling them to be able to implement, that appropriate monitoring and evaluation frameworks are in place that will help sort of define the matrix and to track progress to make sure that we get the desired outcomes, and more importantly as well, such that if we don't get those desired outcomes, we're able to course correct quickly. Of course, governance and accountability standards very key to the implementation. There we need to ensure that there are accountability mechanisms that are put in place that obviously align to mandates. And of course, as part of the implementation, as we talked about, there is a need to mobilize additional finance, and there'll be work and ongoing engagements in this regard. But of course, critically important, continued stakeholder engagements with social partners, which will form part and parcel of the process, given that we are talking about a multi-decade process. We have a 5-year kickstart, if you wish. The investment plan will be a living document which will respond to evolving conditions, and as such, ongoing stakeholder consultation and alignment will continue to be a central feature of the work. Deputy Chair, I would leave it at that, and I hope that has given some sense and of whetting of the appetite for people to engage with the 200 pages that are in store for you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Let me ask the Executive Director, Dr. Olver, how do you plan, what is your recommendation as to how the Commission takes this matter forward?
Chairperson, look, so as was announced by the President and reinforced by Mr. Manela, this is now being put out for stakeholder engagement. And I think what's important is that there really is a thorough process of scrutinizing the plan and commenting on it. You know, what we have done previously as the Commission, you know, we supported the PCFTT by facilitating a set of stakeholder engagements. I think it's up to them as to how they want to structure that process, but certainly from the side of the Presidential Climate Commission, we would, continue to be willing to support. I think the real substantive engagement at the level of the Commission itself should probably take place at our meeting on the 2nd of December. That's when there is a scheduled meeting, and I think by then all of the commissioners would have really had time to dig into this plan and scrutinize it. But we'll be willing to assist with Mr. Manele's team should they, want to set up any detailed, in-depth engagements with different stakeholder groups, or even a multi-stakeholder engagement process.
Okay, good. Let me open it up. I know it's late in the day, so are there any other comments from commissioners that you'd like to make at this stage? We're not going to go into the substance of the matter, of course, here and now, because the documents have not been circulated as yet. I take it, Dr. Olver, that you will put the documentation on the website of the Commission so that it's accessible to everybody.
Correct, Deputy Chair. So just procedurally, I think the Presidency is going to issue a press statement with a link to the document. It will be on the Presidency website. Okay. We will, of course, pick up and amplify that statement. But, properly speaking, this is a Presidency document. It's come from the PCFTT.
Yeah. So what's the job of the Climate Commission? Our job is to take a government proposal and see whether it can be turned into a national country proposal that is supported by and owned by the country as a whole. And that's why we got to elaborate a way in which business, labor, civil society, and others, the academia, etc., can give their input and participate in a process which can build consensus around this document or an amended version of the proposal as such. And so at the meeting of the 2nd of December, perhaps the most that we can do is to agree on what that process would be and set some timeframes, etc. I doubt whether on the 2nd of December we can actually go into the substance of the matter and comment on it substantively and in order to agree or not agree. I think that would be taking it a bit too fast, in my view. I think let's set the process there, and in the course of we can have a time frame as to by which time this must end, and we give as a commission a feedback to government on this matter. What do you think?
Yes, I think the 2nd of December, obviously, these commission meeting agendas are constrained. I like the vision that you're setting up, which is we want to get to a point where we have an investment plan that's embraced by all social partners, and which has got the broadest possible support, because this is ultimately an all of society transformation that we're talking about. So, okay. Yeah.
Good. So maybe you can engage with government and others by the time of our 2nd of December meeting and put forward a proposal for the consideration of the Commission, including timeframes. I'm sure government has got certain timeframes within which they would like to work, and we must try to be as helpful as we can. Okay, are there any other comments from anybody else? If not, then
Chair, there's a hand.
Sorry, I can't see hands, so please just jump in if your hand is up, because I'm not so clever at this thing, Go ahead.
Let me jump in. Can you hear me properly?
I can hear you, yes, Mr. Mbodi.
Thank you so much. I think what we should do is to perhaps agree that we cannot run faster than the speed of wind with regards to this. I agree with you that we need to unpack it and get consensus. So we don't have to pretend when we go to COP27 that this is a widely agreed and consensus based what you call plan, because as it is, we still have got to delve deeper and understand all the components, but also try to determine, figure out the speed, so that it may not end up with us including people in discussions, but as the plan unfolds, leaving them, dropping them along the way. And I think, yes, indeed, we need more time to do that. We probably can scratch the surface on the second, but I think there is more need for us to go deeper, probably also send some written submissions to try to make sure that all the points are captured correctly. So I'm hoping that we will be able to do it without being too quick, making sure that inclusivity means understanding in totality what this plan is about, and also getting a total embrace of sorts from all and some. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Deputy Chair, if I may.
Yes, Louise.
Two things. The one thing is, so firstly, thank you to the President and to Mr. Minele for cogent and succinct capture of 200 pages. Very, very excellent. And thank you for taking the trouble to come and tell us about this. I have a question about what will actually happen at COP. So, you know, are there going to be further negotiations between the international partner group and the South African government around this JETP IP at COP? Or will there just be a sort of public facing launch event? Yeah, so that's my one question. And then the other is, well, it's a substance question, which maybe I must leave for the second.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Minister Creasy, I hope you're still with us. I'll give you a chance to talk about what's going to happen at COP after we get all the comments from everybody. Anybody else?
Deputy Chair, I see Minister Mantashe has his hand up.
Okay.
I've been trying to promote him as a panelist, but he does have speaking rights.
Minister Mantashe,
Yes.
go ahead.
COP27. COP27 is in days, basically. If there is a plan which will help the delegation that goes to COP27, I don't know how to run those parallel, because they will need to engage there. We can't say they must not engage there. My own view is that if the Commission cannot give a thumbs up for the plan, the delegation must be given a right to go and engage and negotiate. Otherwise, will be something else. Go to COP27 and say nothing. Instead, and say, no, we're still discussing it at home. I know that if we discuss something that has policy implication in South Africa, we can take a year before we reach an agreement. So, and COP27 will not wait for us. My proposal is that this plan, whether we think that there are some shortcomings there and strengths there, let's give the team the right to go and negotiate. And that's my view.
Okay.
And then we are going to continue engaging among ourselves. We'll do that for a year or two, I know. We're accepting that.
Okay. Any other comments? If not, then let me just say, Minister Mantashe, I don't think that we would...
Sorry,
who's that?
It's Creasy here. Mr. Peake has got his hand up.
Oh, Mr. Bobby Peake, please go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Musa.
I'm sorry, you know, I can't see any hands on my screen. and I'm not clever enough to know where to find them. So please jump in if your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Musa, and thank you, Mr. President, for sharing your time with us and allowing us to have at least a discussion about this before you go off. I think I'm a bit confused as to whether the plan will be released as a draft plan in order that there can be a discussion, or is the plan going to be released as a final plan and only the implementation thereof is to be discussed. I think what's really important is that, and I'm comforted by how both our president and Mr. Manele discusses an engagement with people going forward on this plan. And, you know, given the limited input that civil society and local communities have had into the investment plan, I would like to understand, you know, there are people that are living next to oil refineries. There are people that are living next to coal facilities that are closed. And these are workers that have ideas about what a just transition can be. They have knowledge and they have expertise. And for me, the important thing is to be able to finalize this plan and to engage in the implementation. We need to harness that intellect on the ground. So I'm keen to figure out how we do that going forward. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Anybody else? All right, Minister Creasy, do you want to come in before I make my concluding remarks, especially on the question that Louise raised?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think that good afternoon, Mr. President, fellow ministers, Deputy Chair, and all members of the Commission who are online. And I think that as all members of the Commission, many of whom have attended COP in the past, would know, the primary agenda of the climate talks is about how the world as a whole deals with issues of mitigation, adaptation, and financing. So our JETIP would not be a matter that would be on the mainstream agenda at COP and would not really form part of the COP negotiations. However, there is considerable interest amongst a number of countries in the progress that we have made in this regard. And I think that at the moment, as the Deputy Chair has said, and as Minister Mantashe has indicated, this is a plan that has been adopted by the South African government and by Cabinet. And obviously that is important because it gives those of us who are going to COP and who would want to engage with anybody who would want to understand the content and the overall direction of the plan, an opportunity to be able to share its contents. What I think we have always indicated is that the just transition is a whole of society transition. And so just as you came to us with your just transition framework, which you had adopted and you asked Cabinet to discuss and express an opinion on, so we are now coming to you with government's draft JETIP. And we are now saying that we would like to hear what you think about it. But as Minister Mantashe indicates, we would need to go to COP27. President has already indicated that he would want to interact with the partners and other international leaders on the messaging and the broad thrust that this plan demonstrates. And I think as government, we would also want to take that opportunity. But the President has said very clearly that we want to know, we want to receive your feedback, and that feedback is going to ultimately shape how we take this process forward. Thank you very much, Deputy Chair.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everybody for making the time so late on a Friday afternoon to be discussing this important matter. The government has developed this investment plan, and they have. The government has said, the president has said that he's presenting it to the commission in order to consult with the commission and for the commission's feedback, and through the commission to get feedback from broader society as such. And this, of course, is going to take some time. And I think that's all that needs to be said to anybody who wants to know that the government has developed a plan. This is the government's preferred position, and the government is engaging with the nation in various ways, including through the commission, in order to get national consensus on the plan. I think that I don't think anybody is saying, Minister Mantashe, that the government should not present the plan and defend the plan, argue it, because I think obviously those who are providing the grant funding, etc., will want to know, does the government have a plan? This is the government plan. But the caveat is, it will be good if the government can put the caveat that a process has now been started to consult with broader society in order to win support for the plan or to amend it and to change it. And it's quite likely that in certain ways the plan may be amended after consultation with everybody. So I think that would be important. A plan like this obviously is not going to work in the long run unless society as a whole agrees to it and wants to make it work. So I don't think that there's any real difficulty as such, especially if we look at the words which the president has said. I must just venture out perhaps to say that listening to the plan, and without having looked at all of the detail myself, because I don't have the document, I've just got the report today like everybody else, that I would think that the plan is in sort of the broad direction of the various concerns and opinions expressed in the commission over its various meetings. So I don't think this is going to be an interminably long process of consultation. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised that the commission and the members of the commission would want to do it expeditiously, because we want to get on with this sort of stuff. But we certainly cannot do it today, and we're unlikely to do it by the 2nd of December, and we'll need a little bit of time. So with that, let me also take this opportunity to congratulate government on all of the work that has been done on developing the plan, and to be confident enough to put that plan out here into the public, and in fact to be confident enough to say, let's consult, because I'm sure government is reasonably certain that this plan will be the basis of whatever comes out at the end of the day. So thank you for that. Good luck to those of you who are going to COP27. Bet for us, fight a good fight, and we hope you come back with some positive results. Thank you very much. And with that,
No.
Oh, who's that? Sorry.
Yeah, that's me.
Was it? I can't see
me.
It's your president.
Yes,
oh, it's the president. Oh, sorry, President.
I'm still here.
I did say members of the commission can jump in as they wish, and President, you are a member of the commission after all. So sorry for that. Go ahead, please.
No, thank you very much, Deputy Chair. And also thank you very much to Mr. Daniel Minele for putting forward the presentation, which is really a summary of a 200-page document that has been put out there. And I just want to say that, as Minister Mantashe correctly says, we are going to COP27. And when we went to COP26, we were having to deal with a proposal that had been put forward by the partner countries. Now, because we are seeking to do two things, to address our own challenges with regard to climate change, and we've got to have a transition, and a transition that takes into account the interests of our people. And the second part is because we require investment and funding to fund this transition. We couldn't, as the offer was being tabled by those partner countries at COP26, run away and say, no, we're not interested. As it is now, a number of other countries are lining up to do a number of their own deals. But we've had to ask ourselves, what type of plan do we want to have? And the plan in the main, as you correctly say, Deputy Chairperson, addresses the broad parameters of what the Commission has put forward to us. The broad parameters of the document that you presented to myself are covered and embedded also in the plan. So as we go to COP27, we cannot go there empty-handed, because the partners, and indeed it goes beyond the partners, there are quite a number of other entities, institutions that are also lining up to say, you've taken a lead. I mean, first, we took a lead on addressing renewable energy investments. We've attracted enormous investments into our country, and we're the leading country on our continent, and you could say we're amongst those leaders in the world. So we've defined a path. And in terms of moving forward, we've got to attract more and more investment. But as I've said, in addressing the challenges of climate change, we need one to set out exactly in what sectors we've got to address our own challenges, which is poverty, inequality, and unemployment, and address those who are going to be the needs of those who are going to be directly affected. And who are those? Those who are in the coal mine areas, the oil, either processing areas, and all that, those who are now currently involved in fossil fuel extraction. So those are the needs. But we've got to also put a plan forward. Now, they want to know, in what areas are you going to deploy the funding that is needed? And we can't go there and say, we don't know. So the sectors have been identified, as they were also identified in your own documents that you've put forward. Now, our discussions with the various leaders are also to say that this is how much what is going to be needed. It may well be that we need much more as people dissect this plan and say, no, we don't need 1.5 trillion, we actually need 3 trillion. That's great, because that's the type of input we want to hear. I have already said that we need more grant funding. Now, the plan analyzes the funding categories, and it does put forward that grant funding amounts to 329 million. And we've all agreed that that's too little, and the plan says we need much more. So those are the areas that we are going to be touching on, arguing our own case that we need much more funding, we need more grant funding, and the concessional loans and so forth. So as we put the plan out, we want obviously to hear views and comments. But as it is adopted by Cabinet, we're going to be putting a number of those arguments forward. And indeed, when we get to COP27, we're representing the people of South Africa, who through your commission will be making recommendations, remembering the terms that your commission are structured around. You make recommendations to government, and government then takes those recommendations forward so that we can implement them. So we are all at IDEM. There's no, I don't see any disagreement. I don't see any divergence. If anything, what should come out of the commission is the additions and obviously also the critical comments. But we must move forward, because moving backwards will be overtaken by events, and or standing still will also be overtaken by events. So let's take all this in tandem and together move forward as we go also to COP27. Thank you very much, Deputy Chair. I think this meeting has been a good one, and I look forward to our meeting in December, which I will also attend. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President. I think that I can speak on behalf of all the commissioners that the summary that you have given, you speak for all of us, and we wish you strength as you go to COP and as you deal with the developed and the funding countries.
Thank you.
That brings us, is there a hand up? I don't know. Good. Is there, Dr. Olva, is there somebody's hand up?
No, there are no hands.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that. With that, we come to the end of our meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance, and the meeting is closed.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.